All right. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm excited to be with you today. Hope you enjoyed some of the music there as we were getting going. I'm excited to share with you about business planning and talk about how to help you get your business either up and running, or if it's in the lull or wanting to go to a new level, however you want to look at it. That's what we're planning on doing today. So I'm excited to be with you. Just also so you know, I do have everyone muted, but I think I have it to where you can unmute yourself. So feel free if you've got questions or comments as we go through and we talk about all this stuff, feel free to unmute yourself. Looking at the number of people we have, I don't think it'll be a bad thing if we unmute from time to time. So anyway, all right, so here we go. We're going to be talking about business planning. Now, we talked on Tuesday, for those that were here with me, we talked about in terms of the company foundation of there being 6 key pieces that you need to have in place for your business for you to be successful. And the first one is purpose, vision, and why, and making sure that we understood really what's driving us. What's the emotion behind it that's going to help us get to where we want to get to. So today we're going to go through and we're going to talk about the business plan. So number 2 on that was the business plan, or excuse me, goals, plan, and a schedule. In terms of setting the goals and things, one of the things that those that were on Tuesday that I had asked you to do was to make sure you came today prepared with what your monthly outgo looks like. So we're going to go through and we're going to talk about that, and I'm going to get you started on putting together the business plan. We probably won't be able to fully finish the plan today, but I'm at least going to get you on the path and get you onto the road of getting that business plan going. So here's where we're going to start with, though, is I want to start with taking you guys through something that this comes out of. Robert Kiyosaki wrote a book, and the name of this book is Rich Dad. And in that book, if you have not read it, I would recommend that you go and read that book. So, but let me give you the background on it so that you know. In Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki grew up in Hawaii. And in the book, he talks about his 2 dads that he had, basically, which was his real father, who was a school teacher, and then his best friend's dad, which he looked to as a father figure, was his rich dad. So he had a rich dad and a poor dad, and he learned things from both of them. But a lot of the things that we're going to talk about today is what he learned from his rich dad. And in this book, he talks about something called the Cashflow Quadrant. How many of you have read the book from Robert Kiyosaki, which Rich Dad, Poor Dad? So either unmute or throw in the chat box, something like that. If you, oops, hang on one second, I got to get it pulled up here. But and know a little bit about it. Hopefully you'll be able to help me a little bit on this as we go through and we talk about it. So, all right. Let me make sure I've got this chat box set up correctly. Yeah, it looks like we do have it. So good. Okay. So Chuck's saying 20 years ago. Okay, good. Well, that's fine. No worries. All right. So I'm going to show you and refresh to you from it. So he talks about in this. Now I'm going to show you what this cash flow quadrant is, because this is crucial to in terms of us putting together our business plan. So I've got the whiteboard pulled up here. I'm going to draw for you here. And again, apologize to you for the, I have a hard enough time just writing and spelling and all that on my own. But when I'm doing it on my iPad with this little stylus thing here, even worse. So I apologize, but that's what we're getting until we can get back in person. In that, he talks about this cash flow quadrant. And the first area of this quadrant is what he calls being an employee. Now, this book, what he talks about is that's generally the place that we start, is in being an employee to someone else. Now, not uncommon that as a teenager or something like that, you went and you got a job, and as part of getting a job, you were an employee. Now, as an employee, you don't have a whole lot of flexibility, meaning you're told what hours you're going to work. You told when you will come in, when you will leave, how much you're going to get paid, what you're going to do while you're there, all of those kinds of things, which is fine. Actually, a very good place to start is as an employee in terms of getting started in working and things, is learning how to be an employee. But that's the first section. The second section of this cash flow quadrant is what he calls self-employed. Now, throw in the chat box or unmute yourself. What is the difference? So point out to me, for you, what do you see the difference of being employee versus being self-employed? So I'm going to either unmute or to type something in the chat. All right. Either you're not hearing me or something, but Aaron's thrown in here. W-2 versus 1099. Good. Love it. That's part of it. Good. What else is the difference of being an employee or self-employed?
You're your own boss, right?
Okay, good. Yeah. So typically as a self-employed, you're going to be your own boss. Good. Perfect. Let's see. Chuck says self-employed requires the discipline to keep your regular hours rather than be told. Love that. Yeah, absolutely. So difference being, and for me, let me tell you, for me, part of what got me into real estate was I wanted, and I had thought about it and thought, I want to be self-employed. Now, when I say I wanted to be self-employed, I'm not sure I fully understood what that meant back then when I first was coming into real estate. But ultimately for me, what I was looking at is I want to be in a scenario that the amount of income that I'm going to make is going to be determined by me, not by somebody else. And for me, let me share with you what brought me in to real estate was this, is I was working at a bank, and as part of my job at the bank, I always have just been kind of like and I shared this yesterday at Morning Ascent, but I've just kind of been like, tell me what to do, and I'm going to go do my job. And that's just kind of how it was. Well, so the department that I ran at this bank was the research and adjustments. So basically what this department did was if somebody needed a photocopy of a check, we would go to the microfilm, we would print off a copy and send it to the people. Or if they had a problem on their account and said that they made a deposit for X amount and it should have been a different amount, then the teller would send that to my department. And in my department, what we would do is we would go and research that to figure, was there an encoding error? Was there something that happened that created the problem? Well, what happened though was this, is I had one day that my boss had called me into his office. So I go into his office, and while I'm there in his office, he says, hey, I got a project for you that I want you to do. And I say, great. He told me about the project, and I was like a little confused because I said, well, I understand, you know, what you're wanting me to do, but I'm not understanding why you want me to do it, because that really doesn't have anything to do with my department. And what he said to me was this, is, yeah, I know, but the lady who runs that department, I don't trust that she'll get the job done, and I do trust that you will get the job done. So I would like you to do it. Well, for me, that was kind of the final straw. I had already been thinking about real estate at that point. And for me, I was kind of like, well, wait a minute, because back then the way that it worked was in that bank, your income was more determined by how long you had worked there than really like it was somewhat by the level job, but just because I had an equal job to her, we didn't have equal pay because she had done it a lot longer than I had done the job. So she was getting paid more, and I was like, wait a minute. So she makes more money than I do, and now I get to do her job too. And so for me, that was what had me start thinking about this whole self-employed thing, was because I started thinking, well, yeah, I want to go do a job that I get paid according to what I do, and that I'm not getting paid because of necessarily just how long I've done the job. So that's what got me into real estate. Now, let me share with you the next quadrant, and then I'll come back to this self-employed thing for a minute, because the next quadrant on his cash flow quadrant is what he calls a business owner. Now, so again, unmute or throw something in the chat box here of what is the difference between being self-employed and being a business owner. Before you say anything, I know the first going to be said, and we're going to have a talk about it, which is fine. It's great. But just what is the first thing that you think of when you think of being a business owner versus being self-employed?
Money.
Okay, so say more about that. What do you
Well,
mean by-
hopefully as the business owner, you make more money than the employees.
Okay, good. So let's see, I see Cimarron saying you have others working for you now too. Good. And Jeanette Scott, you have employees. Okay, good. So that's typically the answer. That is usually the answer that I get, is that you are going to have employees working for you. Now, here's the question for you based on that, which that is always the answer that I get, which I find fascinating, because what really is a business owner? Meaning the person who owns the business, what are they? And I don't know if I'm asking that question right. So if I don't get a response, then I'll just tell you what I'm saying, I guess. What is the business owner? Isn't the business owner really just self-employed? I mean, isn't the business owner a self-employed person by owning the business? And the answer, of course, obviously is yes, they are. They are self-employed. So here's where I'm going with this. If you stop and think about being a business owner, really what we're saying is this. The difference between self-employed and a business owner, really, because is it possible for somebody to be self-employed and have employees? I'm thinking my internet must be a little bit slow, because you guys are not responding as fast as I'm expecting you to. Well, I'm going to just got some type of technical issue here, but all right, I'll just kind of get answer it. So here's what I would say. Here's where I'm going with it. Is ultimately, here's what I have found. Typically when I teach this and I talk about this cash flow quadrant, it is not uncommon for somebody to say that the business owner has employees. Well, in reality, it is possible for a self-employed person to have employees, but the reason we usually distinguish really what you're saying, but not necessarily at a conscious level, what you're saying is the difference between a self-employed and a business owner is we tend to think of the business owner as being successful, and we think of the self-employed person as, not that they're not successful, but we usually think about the self-employed person as being a plumber, a handyman, electrician, just things like that is what we usually stop and think about when we think of a self-employed person. We don't think of them as someone who is growing a business. And I love that Leslie said in here, we are all business owners. That's exactly where I'm heading with this, is from today forward. So I don't want you, after this second right now, don't think of yourself as being self-employed. Instead, think of yourself as a business owner. Now, here's part of what I mean by that. When we think of self-employed, now, and I'm speaking from my own experience on this, when I came into the business and I thought of myself as being self-employed, the problem with thinking of yourself as being self-employed is you also then become the person who, when your friends or your family needs something done during the day, a kid picked up, somebody taking something and dropping it off, something like that, what happens is that your friends and your family immediately stop and think of you. And the reason they think of you is, well, because you're self-employed. So you can do whatever you really want to do. See, and that to me is the difference between being a self-employed or a business owner. See, business owners have set hours. They have a schedule that they follow. They've got all those things we talked about on Tuesday in terms of the foundation and working a schedule. And as a result of that, like most of the time, your friends and family wouldn't think about somebody who's a business owner and go to them and say, hey, could you go and run this errand for me, or do this for me, or stop and do that? Like, they don't think of it that way because they know, no, they're busy and they're successful. See, so from today forward, you're a business owner. You're not self-employed anymore. Here's the other thing that I think is the difference between a self-employed and a business owner is imagine for a minute that I am Tim Cook, which I think he's the CEO, if I remember, of Apple. So I'm Tim Cook. You're all the board of directors. I show up to our annual meeting and I'm giving you a report of what has gone on with Apple. Here's our latest developments. Here's the success we had from it. And we talk about all of these things in the past that we have done the iPhones we created, the iPods, the computers, all the stuff. Well, we're sitting in this board meeting and then one of you says, okay, great. What's the plan? Give us the business plan for the rest of the year. And in fact, let's do it right. And let's put this more relevant to us today. I'm sitting there in the meeting today. You guys are the board of directors for Apple. And you're saying to me, okay, stores have been closed. We have not been able to sell as many computers, got all these other things going on. And you're asking now, what's your plan? So again, I'm the CEO of Apple and you're asking me, what's the plan now to get things back on track, getting the money coming back in again? What are we going to do? And imagine that I said to you, yeah, I know we've done this business plan thing in the past, but look how much good for us. So we put together a business plan at the end of 2019, but we've had to throw it out the window now because of everything that's changed. So we think for the rest of this year, I'm kind of just thinking we just aren't going to have a business plan. We'll just kind of see what happens and we'll kind of let things get back on track. Now, if you were the board of directors and I am Tim Cook, I'm the CEO, how are you going to respond to that? What do you think would happen? Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, ultimately, you guys would all say, you're fired, ultimately, right? You're going to just say, no, there's got to be a plan. We got to have something that we're going to do things back on track, right? So because of that, the difference to me between a business owner and a self-employed. A self-employed person tends to fly more by the seat of their pants. The business owner actually has a business plan that they are going to follow and they have a schedule that they're going to follow. So that's why from today forward, I want you to think of yourself as a business owner, not as a self-employed. Now, let me add one other piece to this. In terms of being a business owner, now on this, make sure you talk to your accountant. Don't rely on what I'm about to say. This is my disclaimer, so you don't come back and sue me. But check with your accountant and find out, though, because part of being a business owner is you should go and set up a business, whether it's an LLC, an S Corp, something like that. I'll let you talk to your accountant to figure out what is best with it. But there are a lot of other advantages that you're going to get in terms of your taxes that way too. So like I said, check with your accountant, see where it's at. Now, I remember for me, I came into real estate. I told you guys yesterday, if you were watching Morning Ascent, that my business, once I figured out go set one appointment every day, all of a sudden my business just took off like a skyrocket. And as a result of that, I remember I went to my accountant to get my taxes done. And I said to him, okay, I am hearing agents in the office that maybe I should set up a corporation so that I can have the tax benefits to that. Well, he looks at my taxes and he goes, yeah, I don't think you should do that. I think we shouldn't do that. I don't think it's worth it. And I said, oh, okay. Thinking, well, he knows better than me, so don't worry about it. So I didn't worry about it. Now, but the thing is, the business had doubled from where it was. Well, so I go back a year later and I sit down with him and he takes a look at my taxes and he goes, Russ, we ought to look at doing something a little different this year. And I said, what's that? And he said, we should probably have yourself up as a corporation. And I said, well, hold on. I asked you that last year and you told me no. And he said, well, because of the amount of money you made last year, it wasn't worth it. But because of the money you made this year, it's worth it. You should do that. And I was so frustrated because I would hope for you. My plan was to make more money the next year than I did last year. And hopefully that's for you too, is that you intend to make more money going forward than you did in the back. So I was frustrated. So I called up another agent friend of mine and I said, who would you recommend that I talk to? And I called up this other accountant and he told me this. He said, look, if you had done it last year, you would have saved your at least $10,000 in taxes. I don't know about you guys, but like I could have loved to have had that extra $10,000 and not given it away to the government. Now, I'm all in favor of paying taxes. Let me put that out well. Like, I like having paved roads. I like all of these things that we have that a lot of other places don't. And I'm great with paying my taxes after I've taken advantage of every single opportunity that's out there that I can take advantage of. So that's how I want you to think of it is, yes, let's figure out how do we get structured on this so that we can be able to keep as much of our own money as we can. And so talk to an accountant, find out for sure where you want to be in terms of that and what makes sense for you and your business. But there are a lot of other advantages. And really the biggest one being this. Self-employed, you pretty much take whatever your income was, you get to write off a few things here and there, and then you end up paying taxes. But as a business owner, you get their income, then you get to spend all of the expenses that go along with it. And again, this is where you got to get your accountant involved. And then whatever is left over, you pay taxes on. And that's a bit of a difference in terms of how much money you end up keeping. So again, talk to your accountant, find out what makes sense. If you have not done it, get set up that way. All right. So I probably beat that up enough, hopefully, on the business owner for you to understand you're now a business owner. And even if you don't go set up a corporation, treat yourself as a business owner who has a business plan, who's going to have a schedule that they're going to follow. All right. The next in this cash flow quadrant, and then we'll get into the business planning, is what he calls being an investor. Now, the difference being, so I like to get the interaction, but for some reason we're having a hard time with that today. So I'm just going to keep talking. So feel free if you want to unmute and say something or put chat box, please do. But the difference between being a business owner and see, remember I said from today forward, I want you thinking of yourself as a business owner. Well, I want you to think of yourself as a business owner with the objective of becoming an investor. See, that's where we want to be heading to. So part of our business plan that we are going to put together today or get started on putting together today, I want you to be thinking in terms of becoming the investor. Now, the difference between being an investor and a business owner is as a business owner, you're involved in the day-to-day work of the business, meaning you're there involved in making the decisions, all those kinds of things. As an investor, you're going to now be hiring somebody else to come in and take over and do those kinds of things so that you're able to go do other things. And in essence, think of it this way. The investor is letting their money do the work for them is what they are doing, okay? And I just realized, I think I spelled that wrong again. Sorry. When I'm talking and spelling, it just doesn't work real well. So anyway, all right. So we want to be thinking of an investor. Now, the other thing, after he had written that book, he added a fifth piece to this cash flow quadrant, which is called becoming a philanthropist, which essentially is once we've become an investor and made enough money, then the idea comes, okay, now how do we go use that money, bless the lives of other people? And that's a great place for you thinking about heading to, is in that. Okay, good. All right, so we're now going to go and start to talk about the business plan. So I'm going to get that pulled up here, and hopefully you all have one. I sent them out, but if for some reason you did not end up getting one of the business plans as part of an email, then if you will throw your email address in the chat box, I'll send it to you afterwards. But I've got that pulled up here so that we can take a look at this plan. Now, so in terms of the business plan, you'll notice here that the first thing on there is total commitment. Now, before we throw any numbers in there, so if you have, then maybe just wait on it. But if not, then hold on and bring it into there that for just a minute as we talk through some stuff. So let me check the chat box here. We got. Yeah, investors won't take the amount of risk that a business owner would. Good. Yeah, I like that. They're more concerned about the return of their money, right? So that's how I think of it. Is it's as an investor, you got these dollars that are your little soldiers that you're sending out to go do work for you, and your first thing is you're concerned that they come back and you want them to just bring back friends with them. So good. All right, talk about this commissions earned piece. Okay, now before you throw in a number there, we talked today, but I'm going to say it again because I think we've got a few other people not on the other day. The most common number that gets thrown out in terms of a business plan is usually going to be $100,000. I mean, now, meaning if we just surveyed all of the real estate agents in the whole country and we brought it back and said, what's the most common commissions earned goal, it's going to be $100,000 is what that goal is. Now, the reason for that be tied to the fact that most people, this is my own opinion, but most people that come into real estate have not made $100,000 in a year, and so that's why they usually set that as their goal. But here's the problem with that. When we set a goal that way, what ends up happening is it actually hurts us from achieving the goal. Now, not saying you shouldn't do it, meaning that out than to do nothing at all. In fact, let me kind of share with you what I mean by that. I remember as a new agent, business plan that my manager used came to me and he gave it to me, and we went through and we threw in some numbers. It was a very, very simple plan. But I remember we threw in some numbers, and after I had put in the same that what I see most agents put in, which is I want to make $100,000 from real estate, I threw that in there. Well, then after that, what he had is, how much do you want to make in year 3? And how much do you want to make in year 5? So he had a plan where he was saying, okay, what's your goal for this year? But then let's start to think about, well, what do we want to achieve 3 years later? Where do we want to be? And where do we want to be 5 years later? Well, I remember throwing those numbers in there. And then I took that business plan and I went and filed it in a filing cabinet. Now, here's the interesting thing. So I got my license and started there. I was at the office for almost 5 years when they then merged the company with 2 other companies to become one huge company. And what happened then is at the end of that is they ended up shutting that office down. But prior to them doing that, I had left and gone to another company. Well, as I left and went to this other company that I had gone to, I ended up cleaning out my files as I was leaving. And I remember filling out this file that had a business plan in it, and I opened it up. Now remember, it's been 5 years since I put together that business plan. I looked at it, and you know what was interesting is I had hit almost exactly the 3-year number and the 5-year number in terms of where I wanted my income to be 3 years later and 5 years later. So even though part of what I'm saying right now is it's got to mean more than just writing it down, there is power in writing it down. Like I remember still that day opening that file. I know exactly where I was at in the office as I opened it because I was walking towards the dumpster to throw some of this stuff away. And I remember I opened the file and I looked down and I saw the numbers and I was like, oh my gosh, I actually hit almost exactly that 3-year and the 5-year number. So there is power in just writing it down to begin with. But I'm going to give you a way to make it even more powerful. So I'm going to share my screen again on my iPad so that I can show you what I mean. As you are going to go put together now this business plan, before you throw in a dollar amount, here's how I want you to do it. So I had mentioned to come prepared with how much do you need just in terms of dollars on a monthly basis. So we're going to start it with just how much do we need dollar-wise on a monthly basis. But then now that we have that, here's the next thing we need to do is I want you to do this, say, okay, now that I know that, do I have any, and this is not necessarily in an order, it's just whatever order I'm thinking of. Do I have any debts that I want to eliminate? Student loans, credit cards, furniture stores, whatever. I don't care what it is. Do you have some debt that you want to eliminate? And make the decision today or tomorrow when you end up finishing this business plan, but make a decision of how much debt do I want to eliminate as part of my business plan. See, because here's the good news. We talk about being an employee versus being a business owner, or being a self-employed we went to first and then business owner. But we talked about the difference of a business owner versus a employee. As an employee, you're told, here's your income. See, I wish there was a way that as an employee, you could do what I'm saying, meaning like that you could, here's how much my bills are, here's how much I want to eliminate, and then these other things we're going to talk, and then go to your employer and be like, okay, here's how much money I want you to pay me this year. But the good news is, as a business owner, we have that control. We can decide, meaning we have within this company in California, our top agent in 2019 made over $2 million. In Utah, our top agent made over $1 million. So keep in mind that the possibility is out there. And my guess would be if we went back in time and asked Tina Hare or Brian Burnett, hey, when you first started, you know, did you think you were going to be making that kind of money? Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. I don't know. But my guess is they probably didn't realize they could do as well as they're doing today in real estate. So keep that. So don't discount what I'm saying, I guess is really where I'm at, is recognize that you have the ability to create a huge amount of income if you choose. So we're going to decide on debt. Next thing that I want to look at, for me, is I'm going to write it down here as trips. You could call it vacations if you want, which, by the way, I had a good friend of mine share this with me a number of years ago. Do you know what the difference between a trip and a vacation is? Any idea? Either unmute or throw something in the chat box if you have an idea. What's the difference between a trip and a vacation? It's more of a joke way.
Is there a difference?
Yes. Thank you, Tim. Here's the difference. A trip, your kids with you. A vacation, the kids stay home. That's the difference between a trip and a vacation. See, when the kids aren't there, it's a vacation. So anyway, it's always hard to throw a joke out when there's nobody in the room to laugh at it. So I don't know if you guys laughed or you didn't. Okay, Leslie's giving me one. Thanks, Leslie. I appreciate that. Thank you. All right, that's the difference between, so I throw it on here as trips. In my mind, I'm kind of like, hey, I'm more excited about the vacations than the trips. Love my kids, like to go on trips with them, but love more so the vacations with my wife. All right, so now, next thing. So decide, in the next year, what trips or what vacations are you wanting to go on and to take your kids or your house or whatever? What are the trips or vacations you want to go on? Now, here's the key with this. Same thing with the debts. The reason I want you to figure out how much do you want to eliminate is I want you to actually really figure it out, write it down. Same thing with these trips or vacations. Here's what you don't just say, and here's what we have a tendency to do is this. And in fact, my wife is kind of doing it right now. We have a trip planned. So remember the difference between a trip and a vacation. We have a trip planned next year that we're going to be going back to, well, at least I hope. We'll see what happens. But I have an 11-year-old son, so next year he'll be 12 in the summer, and he loves baseball. My family loves baseball. So I have 3 boys, and my older 2 have already done this trip, and we're planning it now for next year with my 11-year-old. But the Baseball Hall of Fame is located in Cooperstown, New York. Well, there is a big baseball tournament, and I feel bad for all the 12-year-olds this year because it got canceled for the entire year for this year. But there's a baseball tournament that goes on. There's a guy that bought a bunch of land that is just outside of Cooperstown, which Cooperstown's a very, very small town in upstate New York. But he bought this place. He created 22 baseball fields. There's these dorms that the kids go and they stay in. So you go for a week and you stay in these dorms. When I say dorms, they're actually a tough shed is really all it is. It's a tough shed that they go stay in that's got bunk beds, and each team gets their own tough shed that they go stay in. But he's got these 22 baseball fields that are immaculate that you go and you play baseball for a week, and there are usually 100 to 104 teams that show up every week for 12 weeks in the summertime to play baseball. It's a blast. Well, we have that trip planned. Well, see, what tends to happen with most people is they would go, okay, we're probably going to need for that trip, and then they throw out a number, and I'm just going to make one up and just say $10,000. Well, when I say I want you to figure out these trips or vacations, I want you to actually figure it out. When I say figure it out, I don't mean just, ballpark it. Like, go look right now, how much would the airfare cost to book that trip? How much is it going to cost? Am I going first class or are we going in the back of the plane? What are we doing? So figure out how much it's going to cost. Where are you going to stay at? See, our plan is for us, the other 2, both times we flew in and went sightseeing in New York. Well, I want to go to Fenway and see where the Boston Red Sox play. So our plan next year is we are going to fly into Boston and then drive into Cooperstown from Boston. So for us, we got to go get the airfare. We need to figure out what hotels we're going to stay at. We're going to need to figure out how many of the games we're going to go see of the Red Sox. We need to figure out all of that kind of stuff so that we know how much is it's going to cost. So when I say figure out trips, you need to actually go plan the trip so that you know exactly how much money it's going to cost. Then you can come and write down, here's how much that trip or that vacation is going to cost. Now, let me share with you an example of this that I had. So we've got an agent within this company that actually she started about 5 years ago. So about, hey, I'm just a, Tim's throwing in their Yankees rule. I'm just a baseball fan. I've been to Yankee Stadium. I went to the old Yankee Stadium first. So hopefully that helps you, Tim. I went there first, there and to see the Mets as well. All right. But here's the thing. I had this agent that 5 years ago, she was in the training class where we talked about this. And I brought this up and I said, look, figure out where you want to go, what you're going to do all of those things. Well, she raised her hand in the class and she said, I have never been on using my definition now, she said, I have never been on a trip. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? And she said, well, growing up, we just couldn't afford it. And so, not growing up, sorry. While her kids were growing up, she said, I just couldn't afford it. My kids are all married and gone now, but I want to take them on a trip because their idea of trips when they were growing up was just, taking a little small drive up into the mountains and staying in a tent or something, which is fine. If that's what you like to do, that's great. But she just said, I just have never been able to take my kids and go do something. And she said, I want to do that. And so I said, all right, here's what you're going to do then. And I challenged her to go and actually plan the trip. And so in the class, I said, what do you want to do? Where do you want to go? And she said, well, here's what I want to do is I want to take my kids and I want to go take them to Disney World in Florida. I said, great. Go figure out what the airfare is going to be. Are you taking your grandkids or you're not? How much is it going to cost? Where are you going to stay? What are you going to eat? All of those things, the restaurants, to figure out all of that stuff so that you know exactly what your plan is when you get there. Well, so she does all of that. Well, after the class was over, honestly, I forgot all about her and my conversation in this class until about a year later. It might have been 18 months later, but a little over a year later, I was at one of the company meetings, a summit, and she came walking up to me and she said, Russ, I have to share with you where I just got back from. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, tell me. And remember, I've forgotten all about this conversation. And she then said, do you remember in the business planning class when you talked about going and actually planning the trip? And I said, yeah, absolutely. I remember that. She said, I did my business plan exactly the way you said in the class. I went and figured out how much money it was going to cost me to take them to Disney World. She said, I just want to report back to you and let you know last week, or within the last 2 weeks, with a month, I guess, at least, she said, I took my whole family and we went to Disney World. She said, real estate has been so good for me. She said, could not believe the amount of money that I have made in this business. She was doing over $100,000 a year. Now, if I'm honest to you, I'll tell you, when she brought that up in the class, I honestly would have asked me after the class, do you think she'll really go on that trip? I would have said, it depends. If she really goes and does what I said to do, yes. But if she doesn't, no. And I would have guessed she wouldn't go and do it, honestly, if I were being honest. So here's the thing. I would say the same thing for you. If you will decide what trips and vacations do you want to go on in the next year and plan them, like go research so you know exactly how much it is, print it off, have that, and then write down that in terms of how much you are going to make in order to do that, you will go on the trip. So, okay. All right. So next, the next one on here, I'm going to just put things. So the next piece of this is you have got to decide, sorry, let me blow my nose real quick here, so I apologize. All right. The next thing is decide what things do you want to buy? And is it a new car, a new house, new golf clubs, new whatever, motorcycle? I don't care what it is, but decide this year, what things do you want to buy? Now, in terms of this, same concept. If it's a new car, figure out what car you want, go down to the dealer, walk in and just say, I want to get pricing on this particular car and I want to go drive it. Get in the car, go drive the car, figure out exactly how much it's going to cost, come back, write it down. Get a picture printed off of it, put that up somewhere that's going to help you. All right, next is savings. Now remember, part of what my objective here is I'm wanting to get you from being a business owner, because that's what you are today, into being an investor. Well, if that's going to happen, then we need to decide how much money are you going to save this year. Now I'll give you an idea of how to go about doing this as well. And the idea of this one comes out of a book. The name of the book is The Richest Man in Babylon. In that book, he shares, which I think is Og Mandino, if I remember right, it's the author, that what he shares in there, and then I heard this also, the first time I actually heard this was from Jim Rohn, and then I read it in the book later on. But in Jim Rohn talked about it this way. Here's how you should do it. Think of it this way, and in The Richest Man in Babylon, this is how they recommend you do your finances, is figure out how much money you need to live, and live off of 70% of your income. So think of it this way, is what I'm saying is that should make up 70% of your income. And then 30% of your income should be used for 3 things. So the first one being charity is that you want to give back 10%. So 10% of that, oops, I don't know what I'm doing there. 10% to charity. So of the 30%, you should be giving 10% to charity. Now, and sometimes people will say, yeah, that's tithing from what it talks about in the Bible and things, and that's fine or not fine, whatever. I don't care how you think about it. Pick a charity, whatever it is you want, and decide, I'm going to give 10% of my income to that charity. Now, the reason for that being is we should be giving back and helping out people who are less fortunate than us. That's his thinking in it, is we should do our part of helping people who are less fortunate than what we are. So that's 10%. The next 10% of this should go to what he calls passive investing. Now, somebody unmute or throw in the chat box. What is passive investing?
Stuff like stocks.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, so it's things going to be where somebody, here's how you think about passive investing. Someone else is managing the money. So you're giving the money to either a mutual fund. I mean, you could just buy too, is going to be passive. But you're not actively involved in deciding what is going to happen with that money per se. I mean, you have some, obviously. Passive investing is more of you're giving money to someone else. Now, here's the reason behind this passive investing. The reason it recommends passive investing is part of what makes our economy run, which we are seeing this big time right now, is part of what keeps our economy running is people being out spending money, having the banks have cash available and liquid to be loaned out. Well, where do the banks get the money to loan out? They get it from the reserves of people depositing money into their bank. And from that, the government says you can loan out of X number of dollars that you have in the bank, you can then lend out so much. Well, if none of us did any money into passive investing, there wouldn't be money available. Now stop and think about, where does the money come from that somebody is going to go get a loan to buy a house? Well, it's a result of people doing some investing. So we want to have 10% of our income or savings being managed passively. And then the last 10% of this is going to be active. Active investing is where what you're going to be doing is this. So now this is where I'm going to do a little bit of a commercial. In terms of active investing, what you want to do is get yourself to a position that you have enough money that when you come across a good real estate deal, buy it yourself and then fix it up and sell it. See, one of the things that I do, and especially when I'm training agents, is I will usually tell them, be a little careful in working with investors. And what I mean by that, when I say be careful, and specifically new agents, I say this, be careful with working with investors, because a lot of times an investor is going to run you around and they're not even really a real investor. And what I mean by that is they stayed up late last night and watched an infomercial on TV that taught them how to go out and buy real estate. Then they now start to go out looking for an agent to help them go buy real estate when they really don't have a clue what they're doing. And what they're looking for is either not realistic, or they're looking for something that, if it is realistic, and here's my commercial now for you guys, if you come across a killer deal that a lot of these investors are looking for, just know this: you already have a buyer. Call me and I will do it for you, because how I want you to think about it. See, so for me, when I come across an investor who's like, hey, I'm looking for a really good deal, I'm like, yeah, me too. And if I find it, guess who's buying? Me. So that's how I want you to think about this active investor thing, is you want to be thinking about it from the standpoint of, hey, I need to get myself to a position that when I come up with a really good deal, I'm just going to buy it myself. That's how I want to approach it. So just for you guys, when you come across the deal that you're like, really good deal, call me first, okay? Because I'll probably help you with it. All right. So now, with that being said, so as you're thinking about this savings piece now, basically what we want to do is this: figure out what our monthly income was. So check that off. We've got whatever debts we want to eliminate. Check. We've planned these trips. We've planned the things that we want to buy. Check. Now we can total those things up, come up with a dollar amount. We're going to now divide that by 70% to figure out, because that's how much I'm going to put down now is what I want to save, because I want to save 30%. Now, occasionally somebody will say, well, I can't afford to do that. Well, my first answer is, you're in real estate and there's nobody stopping how much money you're going to make. So you can go make whatever you want to make. So that's the first thing. But let's just say that you're still struggling with it because maybe you feel like you've got a mountain of debt or whatever. If you can't do the 70-30 thing, which in fact, remember I said that investors eventually want to become a philanthropist? Part of how they become this philanthropist is the way that they're going to become a philanthropist, because this ratio of the 70-30, the 70% that they live off keeps getting lower and lower, and the 30% over here keeps getting higher and higher, meaning they're donating more than 10% to charity. They're donating more than 10% to more than 10% to active. So Aaron's asking, what about retirement or 401k? Yeah, great question, Aaron. For me, that's the passive investing. Putting money into a 401k is passive investing. So do a 10% or whatever into that is going to be your passive. So great question. Thank you for asking. But also be planning for, hey, I'm going to also have some money to do some active investing as well, which is where you are getting the return on your money. One of our top agents at the company that I love his philosophy is active investing. How he decides if he's going to buy a property to fix it up or sell is, can he get a 10% return on his money? If he can if he can buy the property, fix it up, turn around and sell it and get a 10% return, he'll buy the deal. If it's less than a 10%, if he looks at it and thinks it's going to be less than 10, he'll pass on the deal. So that's just an idea for you as well of how to determine on that. Is for him, and he does very, very well, it's how do I have enough? Let me share with you one other agent too. This is a different agent in the company as well. But he has followed this process and he's structured it to where he has got enough investment properties now that a year ago he returned. So he returned in July of 2019 from a year-long trip, basically, that what he did was this. He decided he was going to actually pull his kids out of school, homeschool them for a year. He went and bought a motorhome. He has all his investment properties, jumped in his motorhome, and then traveled the country for a year with his kids. Rather than having them learn about some of America in their history classes, he went and showed them America, went to those places in this motorhome, and they spent about a year in this motorhome doing that. Now, what allowed him to do it is he has enough income coming off of his investment properties that he doesn't need to sell a house to survive. He has no debt and has enough income coming in from those properties that he doesn't need it. And it's because of following a process similar to this. So just kind of keep that in mind. All right. So now that we've done that, we've come up with our amount that we're going to put down here. Now that I've come up with that, this is going to be the amount of money. So let me pull up the business plan again here. That's the dollar amount you want to write in this total commissions earned. Is we want to write in the commissions that we're planning to earn based on the formula that I just gave you. That's going to end up being your goal. Now, sometimes people will say, what about taxes and those kinds of things? Well, hopefully you have worked with your accountant on that, and you can throw that in there as well, of kind of based on what the income would be, being able to figure that out. But here's what I will tell you. If you have a good accountant who has helped you get this structured properly, you hopefully are not going to end up paying a ton of taxes anyway. So again, figure that out with your accountant, get with them, and worry less about that part of it than, hey, if you'll do this and set the other pieces, you'll be fine on it. All right? All right, so average commission earned. So on this one, you're going to need to throw in whatever your average commission earned is. So here's what I will tell you. From my experience, for the agents that are in California, the average commission earned is usually going to be somewhere $10,000 to $12,000. So I would just say to throw in $10,000 as being your average commission here. For the agents in Utah, it's somewhere around $7,000. So, and that's the gross commission. So from there, you can take that and put it onto whatever your split is and put in the average commission. But calculate what your average commission. Now, I'm just going to use, for the ease of numbers, I'm going to use the California numbers. Oh, but let me back up. Sorry. One thing I forgot real quick. Come back here to total commissions earned. If you go through and do what I showed you there, where you actually took your monthly outgo, you figured out any debt that you wanted to eliminate, you planned any of the trips that you wanted to go on, and you got the things that you're planning to buy. What do you think the chances are that when you total that up, that it ends up equaling $100,000 exactly? Highly unlikely. It's probably not going to be that. It's probably going to end up being actually more than that. It is, maybe it's less, who knows? But whatever it is, here's the key thing on that. When you throw that in there, that dollar amount, I want you to calculate down to the penny. So if it comes out to be something in 42 cents, put it as 42 cents, because here's why. That 42 cents represents something. And every one of those dollars means something to you now because of what you have put in there. All right, so Leslie's asking our commission figures before or after split. Yeah, question, Leslie. I usually say to put it in after what your split is. So calculate kind of, hey, if here's, and Leslie, you've sold long enough that you're able to kind of have for you, kind of knowing here's what my average commission is. So the newer agents who haven't done transactions is where I'm saying use the 10,000 or the 7,000, and then figure that onto what your split is. But so yeah, Leslie, if you'll just kind of figure out for you, what's usually the average take-home check that you're going to get, and I would throw that in as being what your average commission is. So how do you take into account overhead? Yeah, good question. So hold that thought for 1 second, Aaron, because we're going to get business expense in just 1 second. So on the average commissions, you're going to put that into this section. So do that based on if you have sold for a while, which I know some of you have been licensed. Figure out, hey, here's what my average commission check is, and then from there, put that in. If you're newer, then you're going to have to take, hey, 7,000 and say I'm on a 50-50 split, so 3,500, whatever. Now, once you've done that, now it's going to allow us to be able to kind of come up with how many transactions we need. But before that, let's go to Aaron's question. So business expenses. Now, this one is a hard one for me to answer for you, because you got to remember, when I talked about how I'm set up as a business, and I've gone and worked with an accountant on this, so I end up writing off a lot of things. So meaning my cars, the gas, my insurance, all of those kinds of things, I have gone and worked with my accountant that I know either all of it is an expense or a part of it is an expense. So to some extent, Aaron, it's a little bit harder for you your first year until you've gone and talked to an accountant. But if you'll go to an accountant and say, okay, if I'm structured as a business, what stuff can I write? So here's the hard part is, and I'm giving you a personal belief here on this. As an agent with Century 21, you're not going to have a whole lot of
marketing expenses. Now, meaning you can, and there's a lot of agents who end up that do have and create a bunch, but man, I'll tell you, my experience with it is you don't need to spend a ton of money on expenses in terms of marketing and things, because the company's going to take care of a lot of that for you. Meaning when you take a new listing, a lot of the marketing and stuff we're going to take care of for you. Now, you may want to do some things on top of that. So in terms of that, when you're asking, how do I account for the overhead? I mean, probably if you calculated and just said, I mean, this is being generous, I think, but if you said a 20%, so over here where it shows total business expenses and percentage earned, 20%, but I mean, here's the challenge. True actual expenses is not going to be that much. But when it comes to if you go look at my taxes, my expenses are going to be pretty high. And that's kind of the idea of it. So I always have a hard time of telling you what exactly to do there. If you want to throw in a number, I would say you could do 10% is probably what you would want to look at in terms of reinvesting in your business. But when it comes to looking at your taxes, it'll probably be higher than that, though. Or at least hopefully it will be, right? All right, hopefully that helps. Let's see. She's saying she has an appointment. Good. Glad you got an appointment with a CPA tomorrow. Glad to hear that. All right, next. So total transactions closed. So let's assume that I had put in here that I was going to make, and just for ease of numbers, I'm going to just say $250,000, and my average commission check was $10,000. Well, transactions would I need to close then in order to make $250,000? 25. So that's how you're going to do it, is just take your commissions earned divided by and divide it by the average commission to come up with how many transactions you're going to do. Now, now that I know I'm going to do, let's say 25 transactions, the next question is how many are going to be buyers and sellers? Well, let me tell you how to fill this out. Now, again, for Leslie and some of the who are on here that have been in the business, again, once you have a year or two behind you, all of you can do this, but those that are in there here, it won't work as easy. But you can look back and say, okay, how many transactions did I do last year? How many were buyers, how many sellers? And figure out what that percentage is going to look like. Because now that you're going to be upping the number of transactions, you're probably just going to be fortunately upping it to buyers and sellers. Now, with that being said, though, let me speak to specifically the new agents that are on this call. If you're a new agent, plan on that the number of buyers you're going to do. Now, this isn't 100%, but just as a general rule, you're going to probably do 70 to 80% buyers your first year as a newer agent. Buyers are typically where you're going to do your transactions. Now, again, that's not 100%. I've seen people come in and hit the ground running where they do 100% sellers as a new agent, but that's not really the norm. So if you're not sure, I would say plan on, you're probably going to do a higher number of buyers. And for a lot of people, they end up being on a team and that is feeding them leads that end up being buyers. Is another reason that is. If you're calling a lot of for sale by owners and expired, you might do more sellers. But here, kind of think of it this way. This is where I wish I had a bigger screen. So if you can see me on the screen, I know I'm sharing the screen, but you can see the little video. Think of this side where I'm standing as being all 100% buyers, or this side of the screen where I'm 100% sellers. Typically, the process you're going to go through for most agents is you're going to be more buyer heavy in the beginning. And the way that I like to think of it is you're probably going to use buyers as a way to finance your way into listings. So even if you are in the business for a while, if you're more buyer heavy, that's okay. In fact, I had a guy that a previous company that I was on, that our top producer trip every year, he would qualify and go on it doing solely buyers. And he was like, I hate sellers. I don't like dealing with sellers. I only work buyers. So some of this is going to be personal preference too, keep in mind. But as a general rule, you'll start out buyer heavy and you'll slowly work to where you're kind of 50-50. And then you'll slowly start to work to where you typically end up being more seller heavy. And the idea behind that is that most of the time, most agents would rather end up having a listing than working with a buyer. And again, personal preference on some of that. But just think of it as, if I'm a new agent filling this out, I'm going to probably put 70% of those 25 transactions being buyers and 30% being sellers. If you're a seasoned agent, just look back at what your business was, figure out what the calculation was last year, and it's probably going to be about the same unless you're setting a goal to do more sellers this next year, then weight it a little bit more that way. Hopefully that makes sense. Again, on any of this, if you've got a question, feel free to unmute or throw something in the chat box because I am keeping an eye on it and I'll answer questions. All right, next, total days worked. On this, the ideal scenario on this would be to say that you go back on that and what you do is that you look back on your calendar to figure out what days am I going to take off. See, part of why I want you actually planning these trips is you're going to be vacations is planning out when am I going to be out of the office. So you can go back and figure out what days you're going to work and what days you won't. Now, if you don't want to take the time to do that, the other way we usually will tell people to do a calculation is you can throw in there 240 days, which then gives you basically, 120 days off, which is a lot of days off to have as well. All right. But that includes weekends and holidays and stuff. All right. So 240 is a number you can throw in there, but the ideal would be to go plan out your year of, hey, when am I going to be gone for trips? What are the things we're going to do? Recognizing you may throw in a long weekend here and there as well. So maybe subtract a few days if you tend to like to do that. For me, now, I don't know that this will happen again for the rest of this year, but I tend to quarterly try to do some type of a little either trip or a vacation that I do once a quarter, even if it is just a long weekend. All right, so next, hours worked. So on this one is going to be tied to, and let's have a discussion for a minute about schedule. So on this, you just got to figure out how many hours per day you're going to work. And if you don't know what it is, then you just need to decide. And there's not a right answer. Meaning, like, I know we have some people on here that are moms that are now school teachers because their kids are not in school for the next month or so. So keep that in mind as you're planning this out, but look at it and say, okay, what are the hours I could really work in a day and what are they going to look like? And the key things you need to make sure you're putting in there is that you've got a spot for your prospecting. So you plan ahead for this is when I'm going to do the prospecting and put the hours in there that you're going to do it. We had on Morning Ascent a couple weeks ago. Oh, shoot. Now I just went blank. I can see her, but I can't think of her name. Anyway, we had an agent on who what she said she is doing is she takes her cell phone and has alarms set. So every single day, her cell phone, she has got alarms set. Kathleen Bruno, I just remembered who it was. Kathleen Bruno from down in Simi Valley, or not Simi Valley, Santa Clarita. So hours worked. So ultimately what she did is she just said, okay, I'm going to set an alarm at this time. So these aren't her numbers. I'm just going to make them up. But set an alarm for 9 a.m. Then when that alarm goes off at 9 a.m., you can go, oh, it's time for me to be prospecting. I get on and do my prospecting. Set another alarm for 10 a.m. or 11 or whatever. 11 o'clock, I set another alarm. When that alarm goes off, that's my reminder. It's time to do my lead follow-up. Then you set an alarm for 1 o'clock. That's my reminder to make my seller calls, whatever it is. But she just had said, I set a bunch of alarms during the day, and every time an alarm goes off, that's my reminder that even though I'm stuck at home and it is so easy to get distracted to go do other things, that's the reminder, oh, it's time to go do this now instead of what I was doing, okay? So just keep that in mind. That's one of the things. But figure out what are the hours you're going to work, what's your schedule going to look like, and then once you have your schedule planned for what it's going to look like, now you know how many hours per day you're going to work. Oh, I forgot. The other piece I was telling you to throw in there is schedule in a plan for appointments. That's the other thing that I would highly, highly recommend. Decide when you're going to do your appointments. That way, when you're prospecting, you're more likely to ask for an appointment because you're going to say something like this. Hey, that's great. Let's get together. I've got openings at either 4 or 5 on Tuesday. Which works better for you? Like, have your plan of this is when I do my appointments. Now, you may not be able to 100% follow that, meaning you may have a time that somebody says, well, I can't do it at 4 or 5. I would have to do it at 6. And then you decide at that point if you're going to do it or not. But for the most part, have them scheduled of these are, think of it as you got blank spots on your calendar that you need to fill in as appointments. And every day your objective is I got to fill in those appointments is what you're doing, is creating a person to fill in the spot of that appointment. Okay. So that's what I recommend on that. So on your hours worked, that's how you're going to do that. All right. We have been 1 hour and 7 minutes, and we've covered 4 out of all the 3 pages. So we're going to pick up the pace now on this. So again, if you have a question, I'm going to pick up the pace a little bit on the rest of these things we go through and talk about. If you have a question, either unmute or go ahead and throw something in the chat box and I'll answer your question. So the next business plan is sources of business. What you need to do is this. Here's what I will tell you. I have observed this enough. Remember, I've spent the last 15 years training, and here's what I know. They're all over the place. You go to a meeting and you hear somebody talk about for sale by owners and how we're doing with for sale by owners, and now all of a sudden you call for sale by owners. The next meeting you go to, you hear somebody talk about expireds. So now you're going to go call expireds or go door knock expireds, whatever. Then the next meeting, somebody talks about, oh, I created this website. Now you want a website. Don't approach your business that way. Here's the secret. I'm going to give it to you. And this works. It is 100% works if you'll do it. And that's decide on 2 or 3 avenues of business. One of them, absolutely 100% has to be your SOI. The only excuse I ever get is, oh, I don't have an SOI. I don't care. Go create one. Like, you have to work in SOI. So go create an SOI. That might be what your objective is I got to create one too. So, but here's the thing. Number 1 is SOI. Got to work your sphere of influence or create one if you don't have one. Then from there, choose 1 or 2 avenues. And here's the thing. If you were on the morning ascent that I did, I think it was last Wednesday, I showed the chart from NAR where it shows that the highest source of business for listings and buyers comes from friends, relatives, or referrals from friends, relatives, and neighbors. Where the business comes from. If you remember on that chart, after that, it almost didn't matter. Like the rest drop off so much. So here's what I'm saying is it almost doesn't matter if it's just listed, just sold, if it's open houses, if it's internet, if it's sale by owners, if it's expired. I don't really care. Choose 1 or 2 of those. And you may want to say, I'm going to do SOI and 1 other one. But probably you're going to do SOI and 2 other ones. Pick 2 of them. And to some extent, for a new agent, go try a few to figure it out. But quickly decide, these are the 2 outside of my SOI over here. I'm going to work these 2 sources. And then just stick with it. The problem that I see with most agents is they don't stick with it. They quit doing what they were doing to and chasing something else. Stick with it. All right, Cindy's got a question here. You can build your SOI just from the contact list on your phone and Facebook friends. Perfect, Cindy. Thank you. That's exactly right. Is if nothing else, grab that. But again, if you have the excuse of I don't have any of those, and then in your phone, or usually where I get it is I moved from another state. Great. Then the way you're going to build your SOI, that's the case, is go out and knock on doors or get on the phone and start making phone calls. And come to my lead generation class and my class. Specifically my SOI one I'll show you. All right. Okay, let's keep going. So choose 1 or 2 of those and then just with it. Determine I'm going to figure it out and just keep doing it. It's what we talked about yesterday for Morning Ascent. Is part of it is just fine tuning it. Record yourself on the phone. Listen to yourself. Do you sound like a salesperson? Or somebody that wants to help them? If you sound like somebody who wants to help them, you're on the right track. If you sound like the salesperson you would hang up on, you got to change some of your language, okay? But just stick with it. Stick with it. Get feedback. Let me listen to you on the calls, whatever, but stick with the source. Don't, it's all over the place. Pick 1 or 2 outside of your SOI and stick with it, and it works. Once you get it working, now if you want to add another one, go ahead and do it. But what you're going to hear, I know I said I was going to pick up the pace and I haven't yet, huh? Sorry. Sources of business. Pick 1 or 2 out of your SOI and throw it in here. Okay, so you're going to put those in there. All right, next, total hours prospected. That should be tied to what you figured out up here. So you figured out how many hours per day you're going to work. Well, part of that was how many hours you're going to prospect, put it in there. Average contacts per hour. Here's what I will tell you for those that don't know. You're probably somewhere, depending on who you're calling and if you're using a dialer or not, you're probably going to be somewhere in the 8 to 10 per hour. I would say and really, once we can start door knocking again, if you're door knocking, you're probably going to be closer to that 8 to it. But just figure out how many per hour you're doing. And if you know, put in 8 to 10 right now as part of your business plan. And as you keep track, you'll be able to fine tune it. All right, so if that's the case, if I was prospecting 3 hours a day and getting 10 contacts per hour, total contacts per day I'm going to be doing is 30. So that's where you're going to put that in. How many doors will you knock on? We've got an agent here in the office, and I don't know how much money she's did this year, but I think last year she was somewhere between $700,000 and $800,000. She knocks on 100 doors every day. Now, I don't think she is the last month or 6 weeks, but once she can really get going again, 100 doors a day. She's out knocking on 100 doors every single day. And she now has a team that works with her as well, and every one of them knocks on 100 doors a day as well. Next, total appointments set. Here's how I would recommend doing it. However many days total you're going to work in the year is how many appointments you should set per year. So you can decide if this is going to be per day, week, or a year, or month, or whatever. For me, personally, I'm going to put total appointments set 1 a day. Now, hopefully you heard me talk about that yesterday. For me, that I don't go home until I set an appointment every day. That's the job. Get an appointment, don't go home, for me. So you decide how you're going to do that, how many appointments you're going to do. Maybe you say it's 2 a day. Whatever you're going to do, throw that in there. All right, next, listings. Total listings or total appointments attended. Now, here's the thing. Up here, we put in how many sellers you're going to do. So let's just hypothetically say out of my 25 transactions that 10 of them, or 15, I don't know, we'll just say 10. 10 of them are going to be sellers. Well, if I'm going to get 10 transactions from sellers, not every listing I take is going to sell. Not every time I go on a listing am I going to get the appointment, but I probably am going to know, especially if I'm a new agent or not a seasoned, I'm probably going to say I'm probably going to get half. Now, again, that depends on where the listings are coming from. If you're getting a referral from your SOI, it's going to be higher than that. If you're getting it doing for sale by owners or expireds, you might only list half. You might even do a little less than half to begin with, but half. So, but let's just say, I'm going to say if I'm going to do 10 sellers, I probably need to go attend at least 20 listing appointments and maybe even 25. So I would probably say I'm going to throw in there 25 listing appointments to get 10 sold, because I might go on 25 and list 12 and only 10 sell, something like that, okay? So total taken, again, is going to be tied to that. So that's where I would be saying if I'm going to get 10 sold, I might need to take 12 or 13 or 15, and then percentage sold. So typically for me in what has been the current environment, and at least in Utah, if you get a good price listing, even today, it's still selling really pretty quickly. So percentage sold, I would probably say to put in 90% right now. If we start to see a change in the market, then maybe you'll have to adjust that as well. But right now, still properties are so, well, let me take that back. I don't care what the market looks like. If you price it right, it's going to sell. Like I remember 2009 going out and listing a neighbor's house or a friend's house that was a neighbor growing up, listing her parents' house in 2009 when the market was tanking. And I just remember telling her, we're going to be chasing the market down if we're not aggressive. And she wasn't aggressive. And guess what? We chased it down, but we got it sold. Like, I don't care what the market is, put 90% because you should be able to get it sold. All right. That's my take for that. All right. Sphere of influence, past clients, total people in your SOI as of today. Whatever it is, write it down. What would you consider it? Like Cindy said, you might start by looking in your phone and figuring out how many people you got in there that you could call and talk to, that you'd be comfortable calling and saying, hey, I want to talk to you about real estate. And that's how many you have as of today. How many people do you want to have by the end of the year? My recommendation to you would be to get it to 200. So if you're not at 200, get it to 200. Come to my SOI class. I'll explain that a little bit better. So if, let's say that I had 100 today, I want to get to 200, I need to add 100 to my SOI. So that's how those columns are going to work. I will email my SOI every month. You should be emailing them monthly. Sorry. I will mail my SOI, I would say quarterly, do some type of a snail mail to them. And then I will personally call my SOI. At minimum should be quarterly. And a lot of these probably should be monthly, especially in today's world, should be monthly. Call them monthly, but put in there at minimum quarterly. So at minimum quarterly, you should be doing it. And then I will post on social networks, blank times per day or week or month, however you want to do it. Here's how I like to think about that is for a real estate business page, go ahead and post away all real estate. On your personal, you should have a 4-to-1 ratio. For every 4 posts you do that are not real estate, 1 can be real estate. So a 4-to-1 ratio, real estate versus non-real estate on social media, okay? All right, again, if you got questions, throw it in there. Otherwise, I'm picking up the pace because I want to try to be done here in the next about 10 minutes for you guys. So, all right, next is books, mindset. So under mindset, there's a spot there for a book a month, basically. What books are you going to read? So hopefully I've mentioned a few between Tuesday and today. I've mentioned some. Throw them in there. If I didn't mention it, let me just throw one in there that I think is always a good one to read. And that is The Secrets of Question-Based Selling is a great one that you should read. So if you have not read that, put that in there because that's going to help in asking better questions in your phone calls and things. So Secrets of Question-Based Selling is Freeze. And it's Freeze with no Z's. All right, so books. So what books will you read and when will you complete? And obviously we need to update this. I think I put the wrong business plan. I think I sent you the wrong one too. One more updated one. This says C days, but basically just things that you'll listen to. So what audio books are things that you're going to listen to? And there's a spot for 6 of those that you can throw in there. For me, when I run, I have gotten to the point in the mornings when I go run, I actually listen to something. I don't listen to music. I listen to some type of a book or a seminar or something like that. That is what I have found to do it. But that's how I put that part in there for my mindset. All right, next. I will attend the morning ascent. How many times per week will you attend? And right now, there's really not very many excuses to not attend because we're doing it only by Zoom. Once we get back to doing them in offices, which won't be too far down the road, how many times per month will you be attending or week will you be attending morning ascent live and in person? All right, I will attend summits blank times per year. So we offer them 10 times a year. We don't do one typically in July and we don't do them in December. And I think we'll be a few months before we can do them live and in again. So that one you may have to kind of just put, in parentheses once we're starting. How many times per year will you attend? Okay, so there's 10 done per year. How many of the 10 will you attend? You'll attend the base camps blank times per month is usually what I would say to put in there. So we offer those typically once a week. Again, once we're back live and in person. And the only time we don't do them is on the week of summit. We don't do it. So how many times per month? So think of it as they're typically 3 times per month, unless there's a 5 Wednesdays or whatever day of the week your office does it. Then there might be 4 that month. But typically 3 times per month that they happen. So are you 2 out of the 3 or 3 out of the 3? Okay. I will attend the C21 systems training, which basically is just when we do ZAP training, those type of things. How often are you going to train those? Try to get something done technology-wise monthly. So how many times per month? I will complete my new agent coaching by, and that actually would be the peak agent training that I do. If you're going to complete that and do that, when will you complete it by? I had an agent contact me this week and say, I know I have to complete it within a year. And I was like, well, who said that? Because I do it sooner than later for sure. But who said you had to do it in a year? My guess is she wrote it down in her business plan that she was going to do it in a year. So, all right. I will visualize and meditate blank times per day. So how many times are you going to visualize or meditate? I will record my listing presentation by. Man, if you haven't done this one, commit to a date that you will record doing your listing presentation as a role play with somebody. Get someone and role play doing your listing presentation with them and commit to recording it so that you can listen to it. All right. My dream board or book will have blank on it. So part of the idea of when I talked about that planning and planning trips and what you're going to buy or cars and golf clubs or whatever is get pictures of those things, throw it on a vision board. So when will you do that by? Throw that in there. I will role play blank times per week. So we have available, which is done on Zoom every single day, 7 a.m. Utah times. Unfortunately for you California agents, if you want to do it daily, you're going to have to get up at 6 to do it. But 6 a.m. role play every day, every weekday. How many times a week will you attend? Decide what you're going to do there. Outside of that, on Thursdays, so today at 12:30 California time, 30 Utah time, there is a role play that is done as well. So are you going to do that? Next, my role play partners will be, pick some people to be role play partners. And I recommend find somebody from the other state, either Utah or California, depending on where you are, to role play with. Because you can find somebody that's going to give you a little different perspective coming from a different state. All right, I can't and memorize the following scripts, and then just decide which ones you need to work on. Which scripts do you need to work on? Let's see. All right, yep, thanks, Tim. All right, so what scripts do you need to work on? How many times per week will you work on chanting or memorizing them? And then I will write out the following scripts blank times per week, or day, whatever, however you want to do it. But write out your scripts. Part of getting them memorized, writing them out. So take the time to stop and write out what you're going to say. Figure out what that's going to look like. Next, I will be coached by who your coach is going to be. If you can sign up for the ESS coaching, do that. If not, for whatever reason that you feel like you can't do that, then get with your manager and figure out how often you're going to meet to be coached by them. Man, coaching is so important, so make sure you're doing that. All right, next, specific skills will you master? So we've got 12 skills that I shared on Tuesday. Which are you going to work on, and in which order are you on? So throw that in there. Next, I will sign and execute an accountability contract with blank. So pick somebody that you can do an accountability contract. Let me share with you, actually, this week, I actually got an accountability contract from George Morris. George gave me one because I needed to get daily messages from him, and I was having to really push for him to get those to me. And so he told me this week, he gave me an accountability contract, said, if I don't send you one 3 days in a row, I owe you $100 for each day that I don't do it. So figure out an accountability contract with somebody to keep you honest on your prospecting, whatever it is you're struggling with. Who are you going to have hold you accountable? And then the next is I will track my numbers, and here's the numbers you should be keeping track of. Number of contacts every day, how many appointments set, how many you attended, listings taken, contracts written, so daily. And then add additional accountability partners to help you achieve your goals. If you want to add some more in there, you're going to put that. Next is systems and strategy, systems and strategies. Which systems are you going to work on? So typically, I think of it this way. We got Zap, unique property websites, Golden Ruler. What am I forgetting? There's 5 that I usually talk about. Flyers from Business Builder. I don't remember the other one, that I'm going blank on it now. I don't know. It'll come to me in a minute. Hopefully, like Kathleen Bruno's name did while we're talking. If it does, I'll give you that. But decide which systems you're going to work on. Zap, learning. Zap, unique websites, any of those that you're going to do. All right, next. Here's the thing. And we're going to wrap with this. I'm going to share this last story with you, and then, and not really a story, but an example with you, and then we're going to wrap with it. So number 12 on here is, what challenges do you foresee to your business plan? So this is crucial that you figure out what are the challenges and then what are the solutions. Now, let me show you what I mean by that. So I'm going to go back to my iPad here. So let me get that pulled up so I can. Now, I'm going to show you my beautiful artwork again here. So throw in the chat box, you can tell what this is. Anybody know what that is? Or unmute yourself, either way, I don't really care. But what is this? Can you tell what it is? Sailboat. Thank you, Julie. Yes, good. I'm getting better at this. All right. So here's the question. If I wanted to sail in this boat, this sailboat, and I was here at point A, and I want to get over here to lame cocktail. Yeah, thanks, Tim. All right. I'm in a sailboat, and I want to sail from point A to point B, but the wind is blowing like this. can I get there? Can I from point A to point B in a sailboat if the wind is blowing in that direction? Okay, good. I'm seeing a yes. How do I do it? What's it called? Anybody know what it's called? Aaron says paddle. Yeah, good point. No, I'm not going to paddle. Let's assume I don't have an oar and I don't have a motor. So it's a sailboat only. There's a term for getting there. What is it called? Okay, effort. Okay, good. I like the idea. There's an actual term, and the term is called tacking. So it's called tacking, and this is what it looks like. So first you get in the boat and you go this way. Then you turn and you go this way. Then you get a turn and come back this way and then back this way. So I can get there through a term that's called tacking. Now here's the interesting thing. Now remember I said you got to figure out what are the challenges. So after you've put this business plan together, I am already telling you while you're putting it together, you're going to have thoughts of like, oh, this is what's going to stop me. You're going to have things in here that want to stop you from doing it. Well, here's the thing. Somebody who doesn't know about sailing would look at this and say what you guys said is I would have to paddle or it's going to take a ton of effort to get there. Well, no, I use a term that's called tacking. And what tacking looks like is this, is it is going from, sorry, I got somebody I told that I could talk to them at 11:30 and they're calling me and it's not 11:30. So, all right. I can get there, but I got to do this tacking. Now, to the person who doesn't know about sailing would look at this when you're sailing in this direction and think what? That you're off track. It's never going to work. Well, then I turn and go back this direction. I still might look like I'm off track. I still look like I'm off track, and next thing you know, I'm there. That's why what you need to do is figure out what are the challenges that are keeping you. See, ultimately in the sailboat, the thing that's keeping me from getting there is this wind blowing in this direction. Hang on one second. Let me just tell this person who's now texting me to give me 5 minutes. All right. It looks like the wind is what's going to stop me from getting there. But in actuality, what would happen, so throw this in the chat box again, so get ready. What would happen if I was sitting here at point A in this sailboat and there was zero wind, I don't have a paddle, and I don't have an oar? What's going to happen? Where am I going to go? Because I'm going to go somewhere. That's right. Tim said I'm going to drift. That's right. See, with no wind, I'm going to drift. So what I want you to understand is you put together your business plan and you realize there's some challenges to this, just like the wind is a challenge. But in actuality, when you sail in tacking, what you're doing is you're actually using the wind to your advantage. So what looks like it's there to stop you is actually there to help you get what you want. So as you analyze your challenges that you see, stop and ask yourself, how do I turn challenges into like the wind here to actually being the reason that I'm going to achieve my goal? That's what you've got to do on that last section is what are the challenges, and then what do you need to do to turn those challenges into actually this, or come up with a solution that is going to allow you to get there. Because see, that's what happens is we tend to look at this, the wind, and say, well, I can't do it because of the wind. When in actuality, it is because of the wind that you can do it. And that's going to be the same with you in this business plan, is taking a stop and figuring out what do I need to change? What do I need differently that will enable me to actually achieve these goals? Because here's the thing, you can do it. I don't care how lofty or scary those goals are, you can do it. It's just figuring out what's the plan, how do I get there to make that work? All right, what questions do you guys have? Hopefully, I've gotten you started enough on this to get you going on your business plan to where you can actually create and make it work for you. So anyway, thanks for being here then. If no questions or anything, I'll kind of wait for a second. But thanks for being here. And we will, if you help in filling it out, do that. But get started on filling that out and getting that set up. Aaron, I will remember to get you that as soon as I hang up here. I will send it to you right away. So All right. Well, hey, thanks for being on here, guys. If I can help with anything, shoot me a text, give me a call or an email, and I'm here to help and want you to be successful. So just know we're here. Talk to you later.